All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Amanda Demmer. I'm the Learning Specialist and Program Coordinator for Community-Based Research Canada and the moderator for today's session. We're very excited for this to be our final e-learning series in the sub-theme of our current series on responding to health, wellness, and social inequity. Very exciting presentation today from the Radical Mental Health Doulas. So we'll hear about an exciting community-based research project that has worked towards health equity and mental health equity through this radical new approach to mental health support. This presentation is brought to you by CBR Canada. We acknowledge that the CBR Canada Secretariat is situated on the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples. Community-Based Research Canada is a membership-based organization with a mission of advancing community-based research excellence in Canada by strengthening partnerships, building capacity, mobilizing knowledge, and championing community-based research among individuals, communities, and institutions. As part of the programmings that our members get access to, we host events like today's e-learning event, as well as bi-monthly community of practice events. In the spirit of reconciliation, we open each of our e-learning events by reflecting on and amplifying the goals of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action. This month, we're discussing a research project involving non-traditional approaches to mental health support and wellness. So I wanted to highlight call to action number 22. We call upon those who can effect change within the Canadian healthcare system to recognize the value of Aboriginal healing practices and use them in the treatment of Aboriginal patients in collaboration with Aboriginal healers and elders where requested by Aboriginal patients. So recognizing the value of different ways of knowing and healing, like we'll hear about within this project. Community-Based Research Canada is committed to continual reflection on the interconnections between truth and reconciliation and the various topics we approach using community-based research. We're committed to engaging with and learning from diverse First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples across Canada. In just a couple moments, I'll pass things over to our presenters for their presentation, and we'll have some questions for them at the end before we close our event for today. So I'm honored to be introducing the presenters, Marianne Parker and Kimberly Buckley, both part of the Radical Mental Health Doulas project. Marianne Parker is a doula consultant and co-researcher with this project. She's a practicing end-of-life doula and administrator for the Saskatchewan Hospice Palliative Care Association. She holds a Master of Arts in Interdisciplinary Studies, where she examined end-of-life practices in Canada, focusing on the evolution and praxis of the Death Doula role. And Kimberly is a doula with this project with the mission of prioritizing and normalizing mental health for all. Kimberly holds a diploma in Family Counselling and certifications in addictions and community service work, and has experience supporting domestic violence survivors in peer support and mentorship roles. So I will stop my screen share here, and we can pass things over to Marianne to begin the presentation.
All right. Thanks, Amanda. I will. I just also want to echo your nod to Truth and Reconciliation with pointing out that with Kimberly and I, we are representing treaties, provinces and treaties 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 10, which is pretty amazing because the prairies, Kimberly is in Calgary and I am in Saskatchewan at the moment, represent the numbered treaties and a great deal of movement between provinces. I love looking at the treaties because it shows the horizontal movement of populations just as much as it they traverse the colonial borders of our provinces. So I'm just really thrilled to be representing and honored to be on treaty land. So thanks for that. So yeah, I'm going to start our presentation. I want to start it by saying that because this was participatory action research and because it's community-based, it's got Dr. Joanna Rankin's name on there. She's the key lead of the project, and then myself as the co-researcher and the doula consultant, and Kimberly, who essentially is a researcher and consultant and doula, but also to hold up the 35 plus researchers that we've had working with us on this project, because this is what this has all been about. So always helps to go back to why did we do this? Why did we do all this research? Well, it's because we're trying to ascertain what was going on in such a fragmented, institutionalized positioning of mental health services. And it's not to say that, oh, sorry, excuse me a minute, Amanda. This always happens. It's not to say that there aren't a lot of people doing amazing things, but it's often in a very sort of, you do this for a while and then you go on to do this and then you go on to do something else. The whole thing about institutionalized care is that we ask folks to go to the service, not necessarily bring the service to them. So when we were looking at the framework and looking at the role, we were looking at where people were landing in the system and where they were floundering. For example, women, it's very gendered. It can be very ageist where people end up. And so we wanted to kind of not only understand these gaps, but go to the folks that were living with them to hear what their stories were. So it goes without saying, this was important because there's, you know, probably a good chance that whoever's listening is going to have had a mental health challenge, may have a mental health challenge, or will know someone who has had or will have a mental health challenge. And of course, I don't need to go into the stats, you know, I don't have time, but this of course affects marginalized people to a greater degree than the average population. So more to the point, the radical element of this is something that we were really interested in exploring. So how did we approach this? Well, in 2021 and 2022, we worked in partnership with CMHA Calgary, with service providers and users of their post-discharge transition program. So this was a program that was already in existence. Basically, they went from this program back to individualized living. So initially, they had been in hospital or in a care setting, into this discharge program, and then out back into the community. And what Joanna and team did was go and work with these folks and say, what are you concerned about? What do you think will be the biggest challenges you're going to face? We have the potential for this role, the doula role, to fill that gap. Where do you see that fitting? So right away, forming partnerships with folks with lived experience to help inform where this role was going to go. And so these are some of the quotes that you've seen from the participants. And again, none of them are particularly, you know, medically based. They are all sort of, I want to be treated with respect. I want someone to be there. So we're looking at terms like presence, treatment, but psychosocial kind of attitudes that need to be addressed. And so this was what they were worked on with for several focus groups, through one-on-one interviews, and basically we use their lived experience to understand and shape the role and the curriculum development to train doulas to do this. So again, not just taking the data as if people are participants, thank you very much, but actually embodying and consulting with folks who have lived experience as to where they see this curriculum helping, and what types of topics need to be, you know, approached and used and developed, competencies developed in those that are learning how to do this role, because we wanted the role to address and be directly rooted in this lived experience. So why radical? That's one of the biggest questions. We have radical mental health doula. I mean, radical these days has such a connotation, but really what radical means is taking on some of these systemic biases and holding them up and working with someone in them so we can break them down. It is all about these breaking down the power dynamics. And it's not to say, you'll hear me talk about continuity of care in a minute. It's not to say that we want to dismantle the good work that's already being done, but we want to hold up some of the holes and gaps where it's not quite fitting people and their needs where they are. right? So, for example, this continuity of care might, I call it getting on the bus program. So, for example, we had clients who were saying, well, yeah, like I do like going to see my psychologist, but she moved offices and it's across the city, and I'm frightened to go by myself. So I keep canceling my appointments. So again, psychologist is great. Psychologists probably needed a new office to help more people. We're not criticizing that part. What we're recognizing is that some folks may not have the means, may not have the emotional strength, may not have the directionality, for crying out loud, to actually get themselves into a service. We often hear that, I'd really like to go and see someone who kind of looks like me and has a similar cultural background as me, but do I have permission to ask for that? And to work with them to say, well, yes, you do. If this is for your mental health, then let's talk about this. Let's empower you to ask for that and have it be part of your mental health care, right? So it's taking on all of these intersections of, as you see there, and that's not an exhaustive list, and saying, how can we hold this up and how can we work with folks and validate and empower them to really say that this is who I am and these are the supports I need. And the other thing too is that this quote down at the bottom right-hand corner, I need someone to ride the wave with me. This is the other thing that we found really, really important from our consultations and from having folks come into the program who had lived experience, is that sometimes this is, well, most of the time, this is not about fixing. This is not about, getting the job done and saying, oh, good, we've got this person taken care of, on to the next. This is basically saying, I sometimes feel really good and I can get feeling better. And then sometimes I crash down again and I need someone to help me just ride that wave. You don't need to do anything. You don't need to tell me anything. Just be there, right? So again, we came up through all of the studies of the core values, which is to support people wherever they are, comfort them, often by doing things that seem so simple, like listening and just presence, educating them. Part of the role is to be in the know of some of the resources out there and to help sort of navigate which ones would be the ones that make sense, and to advocate for clients. It can make a big difference to have someone in an appointment room with you or in the waiting room with you to get heard, right? So these are simple yet very powerful actions that we saw, again, people saying they wish they had, who are currently undergoing challenges. And as we started developing the curriculum, really came to see that this was the heart of the doula role. And again, I was brought in I'm an end-of-life doula, and to sort of show that it's the doula approach that is also core to this knowledge as well, and how it fit within the needs. So yeah, one of the things we did as we wanted to, recruit for doulas and we wanted to get them working, is that the overarching goals are to individualize this support. And it's based on folks that have lived experience so they can appreciate the lived experience of the people they're working with. What we see this role doing too with the Ride the Bus program, as I call it, is that, yeah, that's going to free up the professional supports to do their job. And if we bring a client in that is, perhaps more grounded, not grounded, but more grounded, or more ready to be hearing the sort of the treatments and the advice and the care, then that frees up more time for other folks to do the really, other important work that needs to be done. And we hope by kind of addressing that intersectionality is that we are going to be privileging otherwise unheard voices. So, while we would want to work in partnership with, let's say, the Métis communities and our Aboriginal partners, that would be at the heart of this role, is how do we hold up where these systemic voices are drowning out others, right? So that is why this was inherently, the whole project was based on participatory action research. So from the very beginning, from going out into the community to understand the issues, to working with those that were in the mental health community, service provider and user community, to develop a curriculum that was grounded in the needs of that community, and then going back out into it to support the community and to understand how the role is landing, has involved people with lived experience as co-researchers. So it was part of the qualifications, I'm putting quotes there, to have lived experience, to have had a mental health challenge or struggle. It was about meeting on a peer level. It's change focused and advocacy focused. And because we live in a world where, being paid is an important part of being valued, we also paid our co-researchers as researchers. So, and that was a really important part of the funding and the framework. So enough from me, because I could talk about all of the setup, but I think it would be really lovely to hear from Kimberly. And the reason why I'm especially thrilled, not merely because I love Kimberly to death, but I also think that she was both a participant in the original cohort as a client and then came back and became a doula. So she has a unique perspective on that experience and how it felt to be involved in both sides. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Kimberly, and give a little bit of an idea of how that all went for you.
Sure. Thanks, Marianne. Yeah, so I kind of always look at myself, or I have at least for like the last 10 years or so, as a user of the mental health systems, but then also a provider. So it's sort of an interesting space to be in. One of the things that I found going through my own mental health journey is that, the focus when you're using different mental health supports, as they should be, can be really narrow. And so one of the things I really loved about the doula program is there's a broader sort of support that they can provide that maybe you don't get from traditional systems. So I had left an abusive marriage about 8 years ago, and trying to navigate the mental health system, not only for myself, but also for my 3 kids. Like, it was really, really challenging. And, I've done years and years of therapy, lots of training, all that stuff. So I know all the things, but then it can also be so different when you're living it yourself. And at the time that I got the notification from the doula program, when I decided to be a participant, I had just been going through 18 months of a really trying time with one of my teenagers who was having addiction issues, which I'd done training in, but I didn't know how to deal with as a parent. And I also started developing some pretty major health issues as a result of all of the ongoing stress. And I'm really good at checking in and saying to myself, do I need a therapist at this point? And I didn't think that seeing a therapist once a week was going to help. But one of the other issues that I was facing is that everyone around me had compassion fatigue. Like, they had been helping me for 8+ years on this journey, and so it can be really isolating. And also, all of your friends and family have all this good intention with all of the advice they give, but it's nobody else knows my life except for me, and so that became really overwhelming. And so I was feeling really isolated. And when I saw the doula program, it really intrigued me because I had a birth doula for all 3 of my children, and I loved that experience. And I thought, oh, for mental health, like, that would be super fascinating. And I've always wanted to be a doula. And I was thinking about, when the kids get older, I'll become a birth doula. But then I thought, well, no, this is like the niche. And so when I got the list of doulas to pick, the doula I picked him 3rd, and he was only a sort of an afterthought because I had to have 3. I was like, man, I'll pick him. Turned out to be the perfect person because he had gone through his own addiction journey. He also had 3 sons. And so it was just great. It was exactly what I needed because I could talk to him about the things that were going on, and I wasn't met with judgment. I was met with somebody who understood because he had lived those things. And so it was incredibly helpful. I think, honestly, it saved me at that point in my life. And because he had gone through his own journey, he was connected to so many resources. And that really just elevated what was going on with us. So we actually, have stayed friends to this date. And his wife trained with me to be a doula as well. And so I often tease them, "You're never getting rid of me. I'm part of your family now." And so I was really excited when the second cohort came around to do the training to become a doula myself. The training was amazing. It wasn't really a lot of things that I didn't already know from what I had been through before, but just putting everything into this very like natural, organic sort of context, because through the practicums that I had done with my more formal education, I was always just, I don't know, the system and being boxed in and being limited by some of the things. And I understand why you have to be like that, but to have this more to, sort of a more freeing role was really exciting. And then both of the clients that I got were in the realm of domestic violence. So that was something that I'm very familiar with and very passionate about. And it's just been a really exciting journey. And seeing a client, like, we're only with them for 6 months, although I am carrying on with a couple of my clients, but in 6 months, the amount of change that can occur in a person just by having somebody there for them, right? Somebody to walk through things. One of my clients, for the first month, we only met on Zoom because she hadn't left her house in more than a year. And she was terrified to do so. And so, watching now to the point where 6 months later, and, she schedules her own appointments and arranges rides and is, all these things that we couldn't have imagined at the beginning of the life or at the beginning of the program. And, she had said to me, "I just want my life back." And so how rewarding to hear her say now that, she sees that her life is coming together and she's going to have that life that she wants. And I think a lot of the times when you're accessing mental health programs, from a place where I can't afford to just go and get a psychiatrist or whatever. And so I'm just having to access what the system has out there for me. A lot of the programs are very limited in what they do. You can have 6 sessions, you can have 8 sessions. We'll see with you for 6 months. And then, at the end of that, you're kind of left on your own, or whatever the, purview of the program is, you sort of have to stick with that. Like when I was going through the abuse, I had reached out for help and was put into a program where I was receiving CBT. It was the worst kind of therapy for me. I should have been receiving something, maybe more like DBT, but I didn't have a choice. That's what I had to access. And so the thing that's really lovely about a doula is, while birth and death sort of have, finite beginnings and ends to it, a mental health journey isn't really, sections like that. And so the joy I think about having a doula and being a doula is, we can walk through them through that period of life, whatever that looks like. And so that's why, with my clients where we were at 6 months and it was like, okay, the training is done. It's like, okay, wait, they still weren't ready to be done with that. And so, as being an independent doula and having that ability, I can continue to walk through them. And it might just be like another few months, it might be a year or two, but it's something that I'm willing to do with them, and it's benefiting them. So I think that having really great boundaries and having such great support from our community, the community of other doulas and the other researchers, it's just been a really fantastic process.
Thanks, Kim. Yeah, no, I just watching too. I think I remember in cohort 2 when you came in, I think watching someone who has, been a recipient of mental health service suddenly become an advocate within it was really powerful. Watching you yourself kind of take on the research element of it and the I'm going to go out and figure this out kind of thing. I would you say that has had a huge impact on you, that participating in the research?
Yeah, I think that, when you look at a lot of these people, a lot of people in caring roles, right? Therapists, social workers, that sort of thing. Most people are getting into it because they've had some sort of lived experience and want to help. And so, yeah, I think that being part of that, being part of the solution, it's very empowering, because I think a lot of the times when you're, going through the mental health system, it does feel very disempowering. It feels like you're sort of at the whim of whoever might be able to help you. And so to be able to, flip the coin and sort of be on the other side, and I mean, I don't have a bachelor in something or a master's in something, and that's not a requirement to be a doula. So it's a way that, how can I use the skills that I have, but then also be able to just be another human being with somebody in a room.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. Yeah, so I'm going to go back and show you sort of go back. So thanks, Kim. And then you can jump in anytime if you want to add anything to the slides here, because I'm just going to go quickly into where, like, during training, we tried to isolate, like, what do doulas do and what don't they do? And this was, again, something that the whole team came up with. And myself too, like, this was also drawn from the birth doula and death doula environments as well. So again, going right back into those supportive communities and saying, where are the boundaries of this role? Because that's another important piece, right? You kind of alluded to it, Kim, when you said, like, there are good people, there's therapists and counselors out there doing really well, therapist and counselor type things, and we are not that. And we don't need to be that, right? We want to be a little more informal and a little bit less, I don't like to use the word professional, but we aren't bound by certain restrictions that other professional roles might have. So basically, in a nutshell, as you see it, we don't perform anything medical or anything that a counselor or therapist would do. We don't diagnose. We don't often even need to know the ins and outs of the diagnosis, frankly. We don't give medical advice. We don't make huge assumptions on who you're like. We try to maintain a sort of neutral, non-judgmental space when people walk into it. We certainly are told, and we embody the fact that we're not going to push what we think you should get done. We are not positioning ourselves as the experts. You are the expert in you. We are your support person. So again, yeah, we're not replacing anybody. We are trying to provide that extra supportive space where you can work with the professionals that are already on your team. So what do we do? Let me go back to do. We provide comfort and emotional support. And by emotional support, it can be something as simple as just listening and nodding and validating. We accept folks as they are, rather than who they were or who they think they should be. We educate. And by educate, we might do some legwork in looking in the community for those community supports, to not tell someone about, the diagnosis they have. We advocate, encourage, and empower. I love the encourage and empower. That's my favorite part of that section. And that's that continuity of care, and then also individualized care, because if we're able to work one-on-one in a much more relaxed environment. So it does free up being able to get out of the office or getting out of the consultation room and on the buses and into the cafes, right? And it is about personal and family, and I say family, or maybe I should say support system support, because it goes without saying that we're going to go one-on-one with the person that's working with us, but we all know that that also involves their system of support and care as well. Like Kim said, and indirectly, we maybe have been helping her friends and family by providing another outlet for her, so that relieves their compassion fatigue, right? And that's a real thing. So again, having a third party come in, you're not tied in emotionally, you're not necessarily, carrying like decades of family dynamics, right? We're just there. It can be very refreshing. So this is where we're at with the project, is that we've developed it with the community partners. We've trained 36 doulas now, of which Kimberly is one. And we've done the pilot. We just wrapped up the pilot, which was 2 cohorts. So that finished, I kid you not, a week ago. And so now we are in the evaluation stage, trying to pull the surveys and the interviews that we had with the doulas and the surveys with the clients together and see exactly how this role landed. Because essentially we want to make the case for scaling it up and making it something permanent. And again, with the understanding that we want to support the doulas that are doing the work as well. The doula work right now in Canada is very much a private enterprise. You are your own doula, you have your own practice, which works, but it doesn't often help marginalized populations. So if we're going to keep that radical element to it, we're going to have to do the evaluation and the scale up. And, you know, we're examining things like nonprofits and foundations to do this kind of work. So, and also we have been working with the CMHA. We have trained some doulas with them, and they are applying it to their model as well. They're taking the approach and applying it within their programs. And I think that's another lovely way of considering how this role can land, is that it can inform and work with existing programs and services. So we're really excited, but yes, admittedly, and not any researcher will know that this is like, even organizing the data is like going to take quite a little bit of time here. But I'm going to give you a few, looking at the time, I'm going to give you a few observations, that the informality of the role is at the heart of its appeal, that many of the supports come from, you know, simple finding resources, connecting folks with other things like food banks, attending their appointments, going for walks. Like these are really key, and they sound like they're things that people should just do at the drop of the hat. But like Kimberly just explained, some people, that becomes the biggest challenge, is getting to things, right? We found that relationships have formed between doulas that have ranged from the occasional supportive text to full-blown friendships. And there's often some navigating with that, but that is okay. You know, that can be done. And that finding a place to support doulas and recruit clients is key to the success of this role, because you still need a place, right? It can be a flexible place, but you still need a place where people can find you. I wanted to just give you a few quotes from the actual data. So again, as you can see, it meant so much to me to have her go with me to that first appointment and sit with me while I waited. I was so nervous, but she made it fun. I thought I was the only one to feel this anxious about this situation, but now I don't feel so weird. You know, that validation piece is huge. And yeah, my client felt really validated by my support. I'm really proud of her. And I think these are the stories that we need to be telling moving forward. So absolutely. So yeah, I've already talked about this. So I want to, just as we wrap up, there's a long list here. The original team is, as most things happen in research, has sort of ebbed and flowed and disbanded and come back. But there have been a great many people involved in this project. So my heartfelt thanks to them. Kimberly, thank you for joining me this morning. It's so nice to have someone speak about actually doing this role. And Amanda and Rose, thank you for letting me tell you a little bit about our program.
Well, thank you so much. It's so wonderful to hear the work that you're doing. And, you know, I love this framing you have of, you know, why do we call this radical, and why this shift of perspective, and the equity lens you have here is phenomenal. It also really impresses me, like the role that research played in developing this role. From the beginning, you talked about, you know, the consultations with the community and the work that you did that led to the development of the doulas. I guess one question I have, one thing I would love to hear a little bit more about, is you mentioned, you know, the 35 plus doulas who have been co-researchers in this project. So can you speak a little bit more to, I guess, what research roles the doulas have been taking on, and how you're involving those doulas as co-researchers in the project?
Well, essentially what the research was is, as doulas, because this
Mhm,
was always positioned that, this has not really been done before. So
mhm,
as doulas, and Kimberly can speak more to what she had to do, they went out in the field. We did match them with clients.
mhm,
They went out in the field and not only provided doula services, but in the interviews with us, we talked to them about how that provision of services went and where it landed. And so
mhm.
all the majority of the data that we are now evaluating is from Kimberly and the other
Right.
doulas. Like, it will be their experience that
Mhm,
truly is the next wave of informing what this role looks like, because
mhm,
we created it. And I mean, you could argue that death doulas and birth doulas are doing this all the time too, but in this particular case, the mental health doula was sort of formed by applying the doula role to a set of circumstances. And so Kimberly and her colleagues went out and said, is this going to work?
right. Mhm.
Right.
I really appreciate that framing. I mean, I think some different perspectives of research would just call that they're the participants of your research, but you're positioning them as so much more than that. You're really recognizing the power and autonomy they have to co-create the research with you. So that power, and one of the things you spoke about within, the praxis of doulas was shifting those power dynamics, and you've done that in the way that you're acknowledging your doulas as co-researchers within the project as well.
I still think there are some yeah, we're still working within a system. Like, we are still
Mhm,
working within the confines of and quite rightly so, ethics boards and
yes.
departments and
Mhm,
reporting requirements and
mhm,
funding I mean, and those are all important things. So
mhm,
there is a team that is accountable to the people who have helped create this project.
mhm,
So there's always, I think, some element. I don't even like to use the word power, but there's always that element of, we need to be reporting back and being held accountable, I guess, is the way to look at it.
mhm,
When I'm looking at the data, we've had Kimberly and the other doulas go out into the field. I think what will be important to me is, as we examine the data, is how we make sure that when the resulting communication of that data, this is the next step, reflect the people who generated it.
mhm,
So I don't want to see an article, I'll be, oh, written by Marianne Parker. No, it won't be. It'll be,
mhm,
written by or generated from. And then I feel it's
right.
really important to list the doulas that helped create it. And that's
Mhm,
the other thing too, is that, yeah, there's ultimately someone who puts the final words to paper,
mhm,
but it
mhm,
should always reflect the hours and the heart that was put into it in the first place. Yeah.
mhm. I guess on that topic, while we're talking about, kind of knowledge mobilization or dissemination from this project,
Yeah.
the doulas as co-researchers, Kimberly and the others, will there be a role for them in terms of, determining how knowledge is disseminated or co-creating those products with you?
Absolutely. It's so interesting. So I'm working with about 6 practicum students right now who, are really keen on, as part of their practicum, working on knowledge dissemination. And one of the things, and again, we're right at this point, Amanda, like,
Yeah, yeah.
like we're right there right now. And one of the things I charge them to look at, and what I charge myself to look at, is, this is great. We don't want to become too detached from the people that created this data in the first place. So it will be, we have for example, a holiday gathering next Monday. It will
Mhm,
be part of the conversation, as like, how do you want to be involved,
right.
and what do you want to do moving forward? And then, of course, just the sheer limitations of time, and
Mhm,
honoring the fact that people have lives that they're also part of. You know what I
mhm,
mean? It's Yeah, it would be lovely if we had a foundation and could set up like 35 full-time jobs, but we're not
mhm,
quite there yet. But absolutely, this will be part of my reflection in the whole project, is, how do
mhm.
we make sure that, as we get further away from the actual doing of the research project, do we make sure that we're still including those that the whole thing was built around anyway, right?
Yeah, yeah. And you've touched on what I think are a lot of the key challenges that community-based researchers face is, I mean, one, navigating that balance between um, having the community-based perspective while still working within a system. But now you're also speaking about this challenge of engaging people within the research in a way that meets their capacities and their demands. And you mentioned this earlier, I think very briefly, the compensation that you provide for the research roles that the doulas play. So it's not a volunteering of time,
Right.
but it does still require that time or that capacity and that interest in the research is there. So that sounds wonderful that you've set up a structure where folks, can choose how they want to be engaged. And that every step of the process, it sounds like that's a priority, is how do we center these voices and these perspectives?
Well, it comes down to the challenges of knowledge dissemination in general, right? So one of the things that that I've been thinking about is there's what you need, as I said, to be accountable to the
Yes.
folks that funded and gave of their time as well in getting this project up and going. There's the folks that continued it by constantly informing us of the role. And there will also be a need to get those voices. We're talking about, marginalized voices and often unheard voices. Then we also need to take this knowledge into spaces that often don't hear it. So yes, there will be a space for academic journals, but there will also be a space for podcasts and YouTube videos.
Absolutely.
And, if we're going to be talking equity, not everybody wants to read an academic journal. Am I allowed to say that here? Probably.
Absolutely.
Right. And not saying that there isn't a place for them, but I think, for example, Kim, you were at Farmers Market in Calgary this summer, right?
Yes, yeah.
Can we describe that for a little bit about what you...
Sure. Yeah, that was fascinating. So I think I did 4 or 5 different markets this summer, and almost every single person that came and saw us said, "Oh, do you deliver babies?" So I think it was really, really important that we were there and we were out in the community, we were talking about it. And as we described what it is that we were doing, there was actually a lot of people who are already in the caring profession, be it social workers, therapists, that kind of thing. And as we described what we're doing, they were very, very excited about it. And so, yeah, I think that's part of the work too, is just that community research and educating the people around us, because it is a pretty, new concept. I mean, I think we've always sort of had like that peer support, but then peer support became a little bit technical. So I feel like, yeah, we're coming in a very grassroots way, and I hope it stays that way, because I think there's something very special about that. But yeah, community outreach, it was pretty fun for us to do that.
That sounds fantastic. And if I can ask maybe one last question for Kimberly, you spoke quite a lot about your role, as a doula and the importance of that role, but I'm wondering if you can speak to, your role as a researcher in this project, and maybe if you can identify, anything that the team did to make it feel, that you had a voice within the research aspect of the project.
For sure. Like, I think the entire time we felt like we were part of it, even in the training of it, right? And the fact that during our training, the different things that we brought into it, from our own lived experiences and our own educational experience, and knowing that the perspectives that we had and the experiences that we had were going to be put forward into future planning for the curriculum and modification of that. So it really did start right at that very first place. Once a month, we would submit reporting on what we had done. So not big technical reports, just sort of, how many hours, did you spend being a doula this month? And, what was the experience like? And I actually found it really sort of interesting that, yes, we were, in that research space, but then I think it also gave me a place of, even as I move forward with this, like, it's so good to reflect once a month, right? The goods and the bads and all of that. And then 3 months into the project, we met with, I think, I don't know if I met with, I think I met with Marianne both times. Yeah. And so I met with Marianne both 3 months in, and then at the 6-month mark, to kind of delve even deeper into what it was that we were doing as doulas and what our personal experiences had been. And so it was something that felt very inclusive. Like we knew we were part of the movement of this project and the growth of it. And that, yeah, that does add an element to it, right? We're not just doers, but we're also participating in sort of behind the scenes of it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's very helpful to hear your perspective, and just to hear that, you know, the inclusivity that you spoke to throughout the entirety of the process. Mm-hmm. Well, we'll wrap up for today. This has been, you know, such a phenomenal conversation, hearing about your project. I mean, you know, we always like to center the research aspects of project in these e-learning series, but also phenomenal just to hear about this initiative, this new kind of way going about mental health support that sounds like it's very promising for contributing to equity and health and mental health. And you framed it as, you know, not something that replaces current supports, but something that could be supplementary to the supports that already exist to fill that gap. And it's been very clear how community-based research has played a role in recognizing and responding to the crises, the gaps that existed in mental health care, and leading to the delivery of this as a response. So a great fit for the final event, final presentation of our theme. So as we wrap up, are there any final thoughts, Marianne or Kimberly?
I would love to jump in with if folks are interested in seeing some of our doulas and how they're on our web, they are featured on our website. So if you go to rmhd@ucalgary.ca, I just want to hold that up because there you'll see the profiles of some of our doulas. So we haven't had time today for me to speak about each one, and I want you to know that they, like, all, you know, all of them is super important to this, obviously. And so if you'd like to hear more about each of them, that's where you can find out more information. So
wonderful. And we will make sure we put the link for that beside this video recording on our website, so folks that are watching this recording can access that. Thank you for sharing, Marianne.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you.
For anyone you know, interested in continuing to follow this series, this is, as I said, the last event in this sub-theme, but we are continuing the broad theme of community-based research as a tool to respond to crises. So beginning in January, we get into our second sub-theme of this event, where we will look at how community-based research can respond to crises of housing, houselessness, poverty, and income inequity. So we have some very exciting speakers lined up for that, and we hope to see many of you in the new year. So thank you again so much, Marianne and Kimberly. Thank you, Rose, for the support from CBR Canada, and thank you to everyone joining us, watching this recording, being a part of our e-learning event today.
Thanks so much.